Joe Burrow, we recruited him at Ohio State. He's from Athens, Ohio. Talked to him quite often and couldn't be more proud of what Joe's done.
You know, nobody likes losing, but Coach Meyer especially doesn't like losing, and so I'm sure he's going to figure out any way he can to start getting wins.
I have to admit, I kind of miss making content on Urban Meyer. So when I saw this story pop up on my feed, I figured I had to bring it to you guys because I thought it was a really entertaining story, and I don't necessarily agree with the main narrative surrounding it. So before we get to the content, I wanted to thank you guys for 700,000 subscribers, man. I mean, at this point, we're almost at 702K subscribers, which is insane. The support you guys have been giving me, man, especially considering the fact that it's the 1-year anniversary of a very tumultuous situation in my life. You guys have been with me through thick and thin, straight up through sickness and health, through good content and bad, and have held me in check and held me accountable each and every time I mess something up. I just hope you guys know that I will forever be your guys' content creator. You can always give me feedback. You can always criticize me because I am obsessed with making sure we create the best content possible for you guys. And my whole team stands with me on that statement. I love you all, man. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! The last pick I gave you guys on my Instagram story hit, and now we have a free square for game 1 of the NBA Finals. Jokic just needs a point. He's gonna get a point. At the time I'm recording this, it's way too early for me to give you your picks, so I'm gonna post my picks onto my story. And if you aren't playing Prize Picks, use my promo code Mikerophone and they'll give you up to $100 free when you deposit $100. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Man, where do we even begin with Urban Meyer? This man got the Jacksonville Jaguars head coaching position primarily based off of his accolades during his very controversial time as a college football head coach. Now, I'm not gonna lie, his achievements are pretty impressive, but they aren't without their controversies. I mean, we've made documentaries on the Florida Gators teams a few years back, so if you guys want a rabbit hole to go down to understand how crazy it truly was, I highly recommend you check out that video in the end screen. But that aside, when Urban Meyer finally had his opportunity to jump to the NFL, it was met with a lot of skepticism and confusion. A lot of people just didn't think his style would translate into the NFL. And that's going to be very important to note because this is going to be a theme of this story. Urban Meyer's style that we have talked about multiple times on this channel a little bit over a year ago is once again being brought up. The crazy part is the Jacksonville Jaguars decided to hire this man and gave him the responsibility of developing him into a NFL quarterback. And Trevor Lawrence looked like a bona fide draft bust in his first season under Urban Meyer. And to be honest, through it all, I knew it was an Urban Meyer problem. I knew for a fact it couldn't be Trevor Lawrence's fault that he was performing that horribly because it seemed like there was little or no game plan each and every week that the Jacksonville Jaguars came to play under Urban Meyer. And that's before we even get to the off the field issues, such as the famous incident at the Columbus bar after a week 3 game at Cincinnati. Urban Meyer decided not to travel back with the team, got drunk as hell at his bar, and, well, you know this video. Could you just imagine being a football player and just seeing that on national TV, seeing your coach getting caught in 4K cheating on his family? And I'm not getting into his personal life. It's just a bizarre thing to see. That would be followed by a lackluster apology, but it would just be the beginning of a very tumultuous season with Urban Meyer. I mean, in the preseason, and this is another theme that is going to be very important in this video, and this was the first thing we actually heard of him before the regular season even started, was the fact that he would call his assistants losers, and he would alienate his players and coaches by doing this. Now, it's important to note, because this seems to be the truth. One way I determine if something's truthful or not is if we get multiple different sources telling us of different stories that follow the same theme. According to Tom Pelissaro, sources in the organization told him that Urban Meyer's constant shifting of blame to players and coaches have created an adverse culture across the board, such as running back James Robinson, who was probably the team's most effective player, who was benched during a 37-7 loss to the LA Rams after fumbling the ball. Carlos Hyde, who played for Meyer at Ohio State, replaced Robinson. Meyer told running backs coach Bernie Parmalee that Robinson was not to re-enter the game. Only after quarterback Trevor Lawrence asked Meyer about the move was Robinson allowed to re-enter the game.
Also had to fumble late in the game too. back on the field the next drive. So I'm just wondering if there was if it wasn't a benching, it was just all health with Robinson.
You'd have to ask Coach Parmalee. I don't get too involved. Like I said, I don't micromanage that. And I know he's been dinged up, so I don't know if he's back with the tent or what's going on, but I know there's injury involved.
Even before this, in the preseason, Urban Meyer ripped his assistant head coaches. And this is in the preseason. This is when he's making his very first impression. And that's before we even get to the Josh Lambo situation, where he quite literally kicked Josh Lambo and told him,
he says, hey, dip, another word, make your effing kicks.
These are all following a specific theme. Urban Meyer being verbally abusive towards his players and his coaches. And I guess 10 years ago, this was fine. I mean, I guess in college football, this is fine to get the best out of your players, to make them tougher. In the NFL, obviously that strategy didn't work, especially when you're not making the greatest decisions yourself. I mean, it's very hard to follow a man that is trying to be a strict disciplinarian who's calling you a loser when he was quite literally caught in 4K cheating on his wife at a bar with a woman that is quite literally half his age. I mean, the two just don't coexist. You have to be damn near perfect if you want to go the route of a disciplinarian. So as a result of this, Urban Meyer would inevitably get fired. We have a whole documentary on his tenure if you want to check this out. And he also said that he probably will never return to coaching again, which I would say is the right call considering how his previous coaching tenure went. And I also don't think he would be able to thrive in today's college football climate with NIL deals and such. I just don't think it'll work. I mean, he had his time, he did his thing, he's achieved remarkable things that most coaches will not ever be able to achieve, and I'm sure at some point he's going to be applauded for those achievements, even though he's had controversy during that time. But what's really funny is a recent story came up regarding Urban Meyer and Joe Burrow while Joe Burrow was at Ohio State. It involves Urban Meyer insulting Joe Burrow. According to reports, during a film session in Columbus, Urban Meyer was unhappy with the way that Joe Burrow was performing on the field and proceeded to tell him that he was a D2 quarterback and that he throws like a girl, which again sounds fairly consistent to what he did to Josh Lambo. It sounds fairly consistent to his inability to hold himself accountable. It sounds fairly consistent as to what he said to his assistants. This was not an aberration from Meyer either, apparently, who according to one of his former assistants would consistently poke and prod players, including Burrow, and welcome them to transfer if they couldn't handle the pressure of being at Ohio State. He would get personal, the former assistant said. Joe Burrow would throw an interception and he'd be like, wow, call your dad. Maybe they'll take you at Ohio U. Like, he'd bring your family into it. This man was a expletive, I'm assuming he's saying an ass or something like that, but it was all calculated. He didn't care. He was trying to make Joe Burrow a great player, which is why I think this is funny, because a lot of people are looking at this and saying,
oh my God, Urban Meyer, who has had a horrific coaching resume the past 4 years, tried to talk down to Joe Burrow, who ended up being a Heisman Trophy winner and the #1 overall pick.
Took the Cincinnati Bengals to a Super Bowl and an AFC championship. Now, I have to give props to Joe Burrow because he truly is a man of the people. I mean, the way he responds is remarkable here, and we're going to get to that in a sec. My personal thoughts on this is, believe it or not, I don't think Urban Meyer did anything wrong. I mean, like I said earlier in this video, if insulting your players gets the best out of them, in college, if it works, then go for it. By all means, if that's what gets your players going, and if your players are willing to run through a wall because of you, then by all means do it. I mean, you see Bill Belichick in the Patriot way. It doesn't necessarily work for anyone else that tries to rip Bill Belichick's Patriot way. It only works for him. If that works for you and players want to play for you and players are consistently coming to your college and recruiting's going well, and back then it was, then by all means, go for it. Another note is, and Joe Burrow's actually going to say this, the Joe Burrow that was at Ohio State isn't the Joe Burrow that you see in front of your face in today's game. And Burrow makes sure that you know this. So Joe Burrow opened up by saying that he actually agreed. His arm strength back then wasn't up to par. He offered more of an explanation in a new conversation with Billy Embody of 24/7 Sports. Yeah, Coach Meyer, when he gets a new quarterback there as a freshman, he kind of pokes and prods them to see what they can take, and then if they can go out and execute while he's back there yelling at them. So he kind of mimics environments you're going to see on the road. So he wants to see if their quarterbacks can handle it, so he wouldn't be back there yelling at me saying, think you're a D2 quarterback you can't throw and just see if you can handle it as a quarterback. So it's pretty much what I was saying originally. One, Joe Burrow says, yeah, I sucked at throwing. My arm strength wasn't up to par. And two, this is how Urban Meyer generates pressure on his quarterbacks to try to mimic actual environments and situations. And maybe back then it worked. And maybe in college football it still works. But I don't necessarily know if that is going to be the case now, which is why Urban Meyer is probably smart to stay out of football altogether. Look, man, as time goes on, coaching evolves. What worked 10 years ago or 15 years ago might not work now. The same methodology that you apply to your team may not work for another team. And at the end of the day, how do you know that this experience isn't what turned Joe Burrow into what he is today? He has nothing against Urban Meyer. He said multiple times that he has tremendous respect for him because Urban Meyer felt like he had a more talented player in front of Joe Burrow. And if it wasn't for that experience, transferring to LSU would never happen. Joe Burrow would never win Heisman. He would never win a national championship. He would never be the #1 overall pick. So I don't think he harbors any resentment towards Urban Meyer, but I felt like this is a funny story to bring you nonetheless. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.